Good morning to everyone to this special webinar that we are organizing, the Department of Geopolitics in association with the Center for Climate Studies at Manipal Academy of Higher Education and the UNESCO Peace Chair, which was set up in 2009 to promote the culture of peace and non-violence across the world. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, and to others who may be joining us from the rest of the world, good afternoon and good evening. This particular webinar, what we are going to focus on is prospects for environmental peace building in South Asia, a theme that is not very well explored in the case of South Asia because of various territorial disputes, geopolitical tensions, various other issues that have always come in the way of regional cooperation as well. So to look at cooperation and to how to translate that into peace building efforts through environmental cooperation is something that this particular webinar will particularly focus on and try to explore ways in which this can be achieved. We have with us two very special guests, Ambika Vishwanath and Mirza Sadakat Huda, both of who have worked on environmental peace building efforts, not just in the South Asian region, but in fact in other parts of the world as well. For example, Ambika has also worked on the West Asian region, Wana region, West Asian and North African region. Mirza has been working on the Central Asian region as well. So they have a wide array of expertise when it comes to the field of environmental peace building in general, and more particularly when it comes to the South Asian region, especially on issues like water and energy. So it's a pleasure to invite you both to speak on this very important theme today, considering the kind of environmental disruptions that we are seeing across this region, and at the same time, the kind of political tensions that exist in the region, which are scuttling any prospects for cooperation. So therefore, I would like to welcome you both once again. And now I would like to invite Dr. Nandkishore to provide the welcome remarks before I introduce the two speakers.
Each one of you. Am I audible?
The voice was breaking a bit, but now it's fine. You can speak, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Very good morning to each one of you. Thanks for joining us on a Saturday morning. Comparatively gloomy here because of the rains, but yet I think it's a very important initiative in terms of looking at a region that's comparatively very volatile just after probably the West Asia, North Africa region, and also a region that's known for great power politics, known for a lot of domestic issues, also known for having some of the greatest population. It's been a home of so many things. Of late, it's also a region that's been prone to a lot of issues with regard to environmental security, climate change, many other which have been a point I see rather than, though there are too many divergences and there are issues, but at the same time, I think these also can be convergences when there are other security issues which may not be able to, or we may not be able to resolve in the times to come because of known factors that are geopolitical in nature, boundary, borders, frontiers. There are so many issues that are associated, but this perhaps is one area in which the countries can converge and they can also come together and work, because individual egos are not going to help anyway. Individual egos are not going to bring prospect. Second, there's certain possibility of the population in each of these countries getting affected badly. That's going to be directly hurting the economy as well. So environmental peace building in South Asia is perhaps the pressing need. That's what I feel, and it requires much more attention from the policymakers than sort of lip service or than the sort of cosmetic approach that they have taken so far. I think in terms of the concrete way, if they are able to bring all sorts of stakeholders from individuals, organizations, NGOs to government, if all of them can work together, then only perhaps we can imagine some sort of peace building that can happen through the environmental security part. That environmental peace building, as I mentioned, has to be led by the leadership for sure. If it has to sustain, that's something that we have seen, at least in this region, without the political leadership taking chances or political leadership taking clue, I don't think others will be able to succeed, because even if they want to, the states might not help them out, and then subsequently leading to dormant scenarios that have been observed in the past too, whenever it comes to the issues of peace building in the region itself. So from that perspective, and given the type of importance that the topic holds, I'm very happy that both Ambika as well as Mirza were able to be part of this initiative as part of the UNESCO Peace Chair, which is very crucial, and we've been of late doing a lot of activities almost on a weekly basis. Though our plan is to do one in a month, it just happened a few weeks ago, a week ago rather, and we've been able to do. I think this sensitization part is very important. People are getting to know, and the idea is to percolate ideas coming from other parts of the world where you people are operating, and then what we can also think, or we can also contribute to the work is the idea behind this particular initiative. So my hearty welcome to both of you. We have been a department since 2010 as a teaching department. Over a period of time, we have grown in a modest way, and we've been trying to do whatever that is possible, keeping environmental security and climate change as one of our core, to see to it that we are able to sensitize, we're able to percolate the idea among the younger generation to take more interest in research, more interest in getting into the field the subject demands. So thanks to both of you, and welcome to the family of Department of Geopolitics and International Relations. Very happy to have you people here. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you so much. I think he gave already an introduction to the theme of the webinar itself. And as I already mentioned, both these speakers have extensive experience of working on environmental peace building, which is, as I mentioned, it's an underexplored area when it comes to South Asia because of various reasons. And I'm not going to go into that, because I'm sure both the speakers will actually speak about it much more. So before I invite Ambika to speak about environmental peace building with respect to water, I will introduce both the speakers together, and we will move on to the first presentation by Ambika. So Ambika Vishwanath, she's the founding director of Kuber9 Initiative. In fact, she has been associated with this department for a while. In fact, she's been helping some of our students as well, working on gender and foreign policy in particular. So just to give a brief introduction, she has done a lot of things, but I'm going to keep it brief. She's a geopolitical analyst and water security specialist with over 13 years of experience in the field of governance and foreign policy. She has led track 2 diplomacy efforts and consulted with several governments and international organizations in the MENA region, Europe and India, and helped shape their policies in the field of conflict resolution, water diplomacy and security. She's the first Indian to be invited as a member of the prestigious Munich Young Leaders Network, and where she was invited to consult with and speak at various events and conferences across the MENA region, India and Europe by the Hague Institute, Kober Foundation, Central University of Jammu, TERI, Mumbai University and others. She is a well-published author, and apart from that, she is also part of the inaugural cohort of the China-India Visiting Scholars Fellowship 2020-21 Ashoka University, and also a non-resident fellow with the Agora Institute in Germany. So welcome, Ambika. Now a brief introduction about Mirza. Mirza Sadakat Huda is a postdoctoral research fellow at the OSCE Academy in Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan. He is a 2020-21 Asia Edge Fellow at the National Bureau of Asian Research, Washington, and a non-resident fellow at Energy Peace Partners in California. His primary research interest is on the link between natural resource governance and conflict resolution. He's also interested in the environmental and social impacts of infrastructure development. His current research projects focus on the politics of renewable energy in Asia, global climate governance, and the Belt and Road Initiative. His work has been published in International Affairs, Energy Policy, Geoforum, and various other journals and books, and also various online forums as well. He's the author of Energy Cooperation in South Asia, Utilizing Natural Resources for Peace and Sustainable Development, which was published in 2020 by Rutledge. He earned his PhD from the Sustainable Minerals Institute of the University of Queensland, where actually he worked with Professor Matt McDonald, who spoke recently at the department as well. And he has provided consultancy and advisory services to the Office of the Coordinator of OSCE Economic and Environmental Activities and the United Nations Environment Program. So as you can see, they are probably the best to speak about this issue. And of course, the students are also welcome to ask questions about, any other areas. It doesn't have to be just about South Asia, since you can see that, they have expertise in other areas also. So most welcome to pose questions with respect to other regions or other issues as well. So now I will hand over the screen to Ambika.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dhanashree and Nandakishore, for this opportunity and this introduction. Sorry, on my Teams, it's saying, should I dismiss?
No, that's fine. That I've just spotlighted you so that, in the video, it's just your face that comes in the recording. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again. And it's great to have this association with the department. I'm going to say I only wish a couple of decades ago when I was doing my master's, these kind of opportunities were available in India. And one day, I've already told Dhanashree this, one day I hope to come and audit some of her classes. So in that sense, I think all of you students are very lucky. So environmental peace building in South Asia. So I'm going to speak about it from the water perspective. Now, obviously, when we think of environment, it's a wide range of areas that we can look at. And there is no doubt, and I will say this probably repeatedly, that water is part of all of these different areas. And I know Mirza will agree with me in that when we talk about water and energy, they are very closely aligned. So when we speak about environment, we have to think of it from that larger perspective as well. So I wanted to just put that out there as an important note in that sense. So can water form the basis of cooperation or the building blocks of cooperation? I'm going to say yes. Yes, because I've seen it happen in many parts of this world. What is very important to understand here is that over the last 60, 70 years or so that we've different forms of water cooperation have come about in many river basins around the world, shared river basins around the world. Water is actually, there's been more instances of cooperation than of conflict. So this adage of like water war is something I feel like we need to really move away from. Granted, there is conflict over water. Water becomes a risk multiplier in many cases. Water is used as a tool and as a weapon. We've seen that recently. That happened quite extensively and horrifyingly in Syria and in Iraq. We've seen it in other countries as well and in regions. So there is no doubt that this is not a reality. But to harp only on that and to say that water then doesn't become that basis of cooperation, I think is quite wrong. So I'm going to sort of speak from that perspective and hopefully bring a little bit about a hope that this is possible in South Asia as well. A little bit about South Asia, or rather the lens that I'm looking at South Asia in this sense is Pakistan, India, Nepal, Bhutan, China, and Bangladesh. Now, I understand from a geographical, political perspective, we don't include China in this equation, but I include China because I'm looking at it from the river basins perspective, and in which case then we cannot include China and the Tibetan Autonomous Region. So the river basins then that I'm considering are the Indus River Basin, bit on the west of India, the Ganga and the Brahmaputra and the Meghna Basin, which is on the north and on the eastern side. So in that sense, we go from Pakistan to all of the other countries that I've mentioned. And this is really important is because Water, as everybody knows, is not something that respects boundaries of any kind, whether they are drawn on a map or they are built. The roads, the rivers, the bridges, the dams that we'd like to build to hold them. Water does what it needs and wants to do. And in that case, then we have to consider it from a basin-wide perspective. And that's really important when we think of what environmental peace building then entails. Is really important to look at the river basin as a whole and to understand also the river basin as a whole. Now, these river basins in South Asia, and there's three really large ones, right? There are collectively, and I think these numbers are a little bit debatable, and I try to do the math, but collectively, there is about 500 to 600 million people that are dependent on these three river basins, either directly or in a cascading effect. So that's a lot of people. These river basins are also hugely at risk. I don't think I need to highlight all of these risks. We are very well aware of them. These risks arise from extreme weather events. They arise from climate change. They arise from population expansion, demand, growth, infrastructure development that's not very well planned in many cases, unchecked then extraction of the water, the rivers, and a variety of other areas as well. What is most important here is that the lack of understanding, and I highlight this once again, is that the lack of understanding of these river basins then exacerbates all of these risks that we don't know, we don't understand, and then we don't plan for, and then don't necessarily realize how to mitigate. So this is the state of what's happening. There is also very little sustained cooperation in all of these basins across this region. Without this adequate management, then we are facing all of these risks at a much greater scale year on and year, decade on, as we go on ahead. We are extracting more from these rivers. Now, to say that we shouldn't extract because we do have population expansion, we do have growth, we have demand, we have need, all of this is a reality. So to say that, oh, we shouldn't extract more water or whatever it is for agriculture, for energy, for food security, for our health security, for the development and growth of the communities that live across these rivers, I think is an unrealistic viewpoint to hold. What we do need to do is find a balance. How do we find that balance becomes then really important between understanding what is our need, what is our requirement, and then how do we safeguard the rivers as well. And again, then I stress is that understanding these rivers from all of these perspectives becomes hugely important. And that is one of the key tenets of what becomes then an important aspect of cooperation is information and knowledge. And I'll come back to that. To give a little bit of an overview for those in our audience who might not already know what is already existing in terms of cooperation in this region, right? So on the Indus River Basin, we have the treaty between India and Pakistan. It's over 60 years old. It's survived a lot. It survived a lot. So in that sense, it's considered a success story. It survived war. It survived numerous skirmishes, border issues, tensions. It survived some very incendiary statements by governments on both sides, and it survived a lot of mistrust. So in that sense, yes, it's considered a success statement and a successful treaty experiment. But if you remove it from that political policy lens and look at it from the lens that I look at it, or I would say even Mirza and Dhanashree look at it, it's not quite the success statement as we'd like it to be, because that treaty is still stuck in 60 years ago. It's an equal distribution of the rivers. It's not an equitable distribution of the water. It doesn't take into account the realities of today. or the future. It doesn't look at how the population has changed along these rivers. What is the change in growth? What is the change in demand? What is the change in the reality of the water? When we look at it from a supply availability perspective, and if we look at it from a quality, ecological perspective, what is the changes that have occurred from climate change? So it doesn't really consider any of this. So in 2021, that treaty is just a manage 3 different rivers, however you want in that perspective. It's not really looking at it from the river basin perspective. And that's why I stress that I don't consider this quite the success story as we'd like. If we merge it, if we bring all of that in, upgrade this treaty, and that's one of the areas I feel like we can actually like bring in some of these forms of environment peace building in that sense, then it has that potential to actually be that success story that it likes to believe it is in that sense. So that's happening on the western side of India. Then we have the Ganga and the Brahmaputra Meghna basin on the north and eastern side. And in the Ganga, again, this is well known. It's shared by 4 countries. So that's there are only 4 bilateral agreements on this river. We have the Kosi, the Gandak, the Mahakali, and then these are between India and Nepal. And then we have the Ganga Treaty, the Ganges Treaty between India and Bangladesh. Now, why are these? I mean, yes, we have these 4 agreements. Yes, they are good in their starting point, but why? What can be done more? One, if we look at it, these are all bilateral. They're not trilateral, or in an ideal situation, multilateral, where they involve all the 4 countries that the river comes through. So the 2 of these 4 treaties only look at water infrastructure building. It doesn't necessarily, again, take into account the reality of the river, how the river has changed, what are the different demands on that river. So you cannot expect a treaty that only looks at infrastructure development to be sustainable in the long term, because that development that might have made sense in the 60s doesn't make sense again in 2021 or 2030 as we go forward. Then you have now the Ganga Treaty again is considered a little bit of a success. I would say yes, to a certain extent. That treaty encompasses certain principles of the 97 UN Watercourses Convention, which is forms the basis of a lot of other treaties around the world. And I think it's something that we should take as a positive and then build upon. So what are some of these positives, right? And I realize that a lot of what I'm saying sounds very dire, but it's not as bad as it seems. What are some of these positives? They have principles of cooperation in there. It looks more at the river from an equitable perspective and not an equal division perspective. And this is a really important distinction. There is prior notification within that, and there is a concept of no significant harm. However, there are a lot of drawbacks. Again, a lot of these things are not necessarily adhered to. Sometimes there is unilateral decision making that happens, and the dispute resolution mechanisms are weak. So the point over here is that I highlight some of these is that these are all easy areas to, or rather easier areas to consider and then work on and strengthen so that your overall treaty then becomes better. But I again highlight the fact that this is a bilateral treaty and it needs to be multilateral in a sense going forward. And then we have the Brahmaputra River, which has no treaty, no agreement on it. There are MOUs, and this is again an important legal distinction. There are MOUs over here. There is one between India and China on flood forecasting and data sharing, especially during the monsoon. But the important part here is to realize is that the Brahmaputra, which is actually, and I actually didn't know this, but till recently, and I've been working on this area for a long time, but it's the 5th largest river by volume. And with the glacier melt that we're seeing, it might actually, that 5th largest might actually increase. I mean, it might become then a much bigger river in that sense. So So do we even understand how this river is changing? And so this river, that's the 5th largest by volume in the world, has no sustained meaningful discussion on transboundary cooperation at all. And that's really, that's not good, to put it mildly. Also, what happens, what we see across this region is that all of these agreements, however good, bad, small, are all subject to the vagaries of political tensions. I mean, both Nandakushore and Dhanashree already mentioned this. It's subject to the all of these tensions. They then become a byproduct of other discussions. They become risk multipliers, as I mentioned before. And then it sort of prevents any conversation that might have started. So what can be done? And I realize that I have a couple of more minutes. So I'm going to highlight a few things that I think can actually be done. And these are not idealistic in the air kind of bridges. These are, and I know Mirza is probably going to agree with me in some of these, is that I've seen these types of cooperation happen in the Wana region in West Africa and the Senegal River Basin that I've worked on, in other parts of Africa, in Southeast Asia with the Mekong. Now there are, as I mentioned already, a number of successful instances of water cooperation around the world. We need to understand what happens. We need to understand what is possible, learn from what's happening in other parts of the world, and also at the same time understand better our river systems and our river basins in this region. Understanding that better data, better information, better coordination of data becomes really important. So a lot of times, a lot of these conflicts arise because either there is a lack of data and understanding, or there's no standardization of data. So A country will say, you know, I have so much volume, but B country says, but actually in my measuring station, there's a different amount of volume of water. So how do we then coordinate, right? So standardization of data, but better data before that, and data that's shared across. Now, of course, a lot of this data becomes a secrecy issue. So what are the kinds of data that we can share that's not super controversial and easier, and then form these building blocks of cooperation? When we look at it now, flood forecasting, we can do that. It's already happening a little bit between India and China. Why not increase it to other countries as well? Why not bring in Nepal and Bhutan into it, and Bangladesh when we're looking at the northern and eastern side? I mean, if we're looking at flood forecasting, what's happening in India is very important to what then flows down and happens in Bangladesh. Similarly for Nepal and Bhutan, to the kind of effects that we see in India. So more sort of cooperation at all levels then between these countries. What we also need then is better adherence to core principles of international water law, and that is the principles of equity, no harm, and all of and aspects that have wider application. We then, in connection to this, really need to consider desecuritizing this narrative that we have going on in South Asia. The minute we de-link this, coming up with different forms of cooperation will be, I would say, much easier. Countries will benefit. And in many cases, then countries will also be able to demonstrate leadership. And I realize, working as a geopolitical analyst in other spaces also, this becomes very important to countries. How do we demonstrate leadership, and how do we have good face in the international community? So using some of these smaller building blocks then aids in that larger goal that I know many countries in this region are looking at being these leaders, so to speak. And I'm not going to name any names because this is not about that, but this is about, again, the rivers and the river basin and the water that we're all so widely dependent on. And I would say lastly over here, and I have a lot of examples of what could happen, but I would say lastly over here, one of the things that we really need to do is share examples of best practices and adaptation techniques, resilience techniques, and smaller ideas that are happening across this region. these are not controversial and difficult to share. Why not do that at a community to community level, at a village to village level, across borders? Build that network between your communities, your academic communities, your research communities, and then take it higher and higher and higher. As Nandakishore rightly said, without that leadership right at the top that has a positive outlook to all of this, it's going to be really difficult. But we can start these building blocks where then hopefully at some point the leadership at the highest levels in all of these countries will realize, okay, there is no alternative but to actually take this cooperation to the next level. So I very much advocate for better community to community level areas of sharing ideas on best practices. I think it's fantastic, and it's much needed, especially in this day and age. So just to sum up really quickly, Dhanashree, if I can have one more minute. Understanding the river, it's very important. Without actually understanding the river, the effects on the river and the cascading effects of the river based on what kind of development and growth we're likely to see is key. Sharing of information that's not controversial is easy to do. It can form then the building blocks of sharing of information in other areas, sharing of best practices and positive examples of what's worked in some areas. Why not share that with other countries, both within your countries? I mean, from Arunachal to Assam, for example, or from Nepal to Arunachal or Bhutan or wherever, however it is, depending on how we want to look at that. And then sort of use all of this to create your building blocks for that trust that is really important. And then push our leaders to say that, this is a way for you to have good face in the international community. And then really remember that water cooperation around the world has been achieved quite successfully in many controversial river basins where countries still have different forms of conflict, but they've worked very positively in this area. So why not look at these examples and learn from them as well? So I'll stop here and happy to take any questions that might arise later.
Thank you so much, Ambika. So I think what is most important that you raised is like the past is fine, but we need to focus on the present and the future, and to look at how really we can adapt all these different treaties as well as frame policies that can really take care of the current and future generations, which is very important for this region, and especially focused on the Hindu Kush Himalaya region, which is shared by not one or two countries, it's shared by 8 countries technically. So it requires cooperation from all these countries if we are to conserve and preserve the water, and also secure the populations living in this region in particular. So thank you so much, Ambika. Now I will invite Mirza to speak about environmental peace building from an energy perspective, which is also a very important perspective, considering the energy demand in this region is also increasing by a great deal. So Mirza, over to you now.
I wanted to start off by thanking the Manipal Academy of Higher Education and Professor Nanda Kishore and Professor Dhanashree Jairam for organizing this webinar, and also to Ms. Ambika Vishwanath for her very interesting comments. So as Dhanashree mentioned, I'm based at the Organization for Security and Cooperation Europe Academy, which is the research and education initiative of the OSCE. So today I wanted to give an introduction to environmental peace building theories, literature, and also policies. So the roots of environmental peace building is actually in literature on environmental conflict. So one of the most influential reports on this issue was published in 1987 by the UN, called Our Common Future, which essentially highlighted the impact of deterioration in the environment on societal pressure and conflict. And the academic importance of environmental conflict was enhanced by the publication of Professor Thomas Homer Dixon in 1999. And his book was called Environment, Scarcity, and Violence. And this actually was one of the first academic attempts to provide evidence for the impact of environment on political conflict. So as Dhanushri mentioned, environmental peace building is a relatively new topic. Actually, the literature on environmental peace building only started gaining prominence in the 1990s. And one of the most influential books on this topic was by Ken Konka and Jeffrey DeBelko, called Environmental Peace Building. And so the main argument of environmental peace building scholars is that if environment can lead to conflict, cooperating on the environment can also potentially lead to peace building. And it is important to understand that peace envisioned in environmental peace building is not just an end to violence, so not just negative peace, but also the creation of regional identities and regional cooperation and broader forms of integration. So it includes the ideas of positive peace. So environmental peace building scholarship and policy making covers a wide range of natural resources. For example, it covers peace parks. So peace parks is the idea that cross-border natural resources such as forests or nature parks can be conduits of bilateral cooperation, so they can bring together disputative parties on conservation efforts. And if you want to go to the Peace Parks Foundation website, you can see multiple efforts at building peace parks in Africa. For example, there's the Liuwa Plains Musana Peace Park between Angola and Zambia, which brings together these two countries on environmental cooperation, which spills over into conflict resolution. And of course, as Ambika talked about, river basin management spilling onto peace in multiple parts of the world, including Africa, such as the Nile, and then you have the Mekong in Southeast Asia. And environmental peace building also covers monitoring programs, renewable energy, and food security. So one of the examples of environmental peace building around food security is the use of acacia trees in the Sahel to reduce conflicts, and Sahel region being one of the most violent regions in Africa. And in terms of geographic coverage, environmental peace building studies have covered interstate studies. So the potential of cooperation between historical rivals such as Israel and Palestine, or Turkey and Armenia over shared natural resources. And it has also covered intrastate studies. So it has looked at the perspective of using cooperation to rejuvenate countries that have been destroyed by civil war, such as Afghanistan and Sudan. And while these are academic studies, they actually look at policy issues, and environmental peace building ideas have been used by many policymaking bodies, such as the United Nations. The OSCE has a very strong environmental program, and so does the EU. So environmental peace building definitely has moved on to the implementation side, as Ambika described before. So now I would just like to talk a little bit about environmental peace building prospects in South Asia. So as we all know, South Asia is both one of the most politically volatile regions in the world and also extremely vulnerable to climate change. So it attracts the attention of environmental conflict scholars, and thereby it also attracts the attention of environmental peace building scholars. And a majority of the studies on environmental peace building in South Asia has been on India and Pakistan. And, I guess we can all understand why. It is the epicenter of conflict in the subcontinent and the most well-publicized conflict, but definitely not the only conflict in the region. And so I have listed here some of the areas that South Asian scholars of environmental peacebuilding have looked at. One of them is the idea of building a peace park at the Siachen Glacier. So the Siachen Glacier is one of the most important elements of the ecosystem of India and Pakistan. It feeds some of the main rivers of the Indus River Basin, but it is also the highest battleground in the world between the armies of the two countries. So the idea of building a peace park at Siachen was developed by Ashok Swain, Professor Salim Ali, and their perception was that having scientists and ecologists to cooperate on the Siachen can perhaps reduce political tensions at this particular geographic and territorial conflict. Then there is quite a bit of research on the Indus Basin. Dhanashree has published a very interesting book chapter on the prospects of environmental peacebuilding in the Indus Basin. So the sustainable development and integrated river basin management, flood control of the Indus River Basin between India and Pakistan can potentially spill over into peacebuilding and reduction of tensions. So the Siachen Glacier and the Indus Basin are, they're highly controversial territorial issues and hydropolitical issues. And one of the caveats of environmental peacebuilding is that it may not work when the issue at hand is the subject of high level of conflicts. And it may also not work if the high-level politicians or policymakers are not invested in in environmental peacebuilding programs. And you're very welcome to look at the work of Tobias Eid, who has done some research on policy implementation of environmental peacebuilding. So one of the low-hanging fruits of environmental peacebuilding between India and Pakistan is actual conservation of the run of Kutch, which is a wetland shared by the two countries, and the Sir Creek estuary, which is also an estuary shared between the two countries, which is the subject of a territorial dispute, but it is not as highly politicized and militarized as other territorial disputes between India and Pakistan. And so Salim Ali has proposed that conservation of the Sir Creek estuary and the many different varieties of flora and fauna there, particularly the migratory birds, can enhance the prospects of peace between India and Pakistan through ecological means. So these are some of the pathways to peace between India and Pakistan through environmental cooperation. So me having Bengali heritage, I'm very interested in river basins. So my research focus is on environmental peacebuilding in the context of hydroelectricity and river basin management. So there is a plethora of hydroelectric projects being developed between Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Nepal at this point in time. And so I'm very interested in seeing how hydroelectricity can facilitate some kind of bilateral and multilateral cooperation on broader river basin management issues. And I'm also interested in environmental peacebuilding at the grassroots level. So there has been some very interesting programs by organizations such as EcoPeace Middle East and Aviva Institute, who have brought together young people from Israel, Jordan, and Palestine on cooperating on the environment. So experiential education, environmental camps, and all sorts of activities based on the environment that helps build regional identities and breaks down stereotypes. So I'm very interested in the potential of this sort of youth initiative around the environment with the focus on South Asia. And I'm also currently looking at renewable energy and environmental peacebuilding, so the links between the two concepts. So I have published some papers on hydroelectricity. One of them is on the Tipaimuk Dam. And I think Ambika mentioned that the Ganges Treaty is a relative success, but when I spoke to policymakers in Bangladesh, they had a different perspective. So there is a variation in the perspective of the Ganges Treaty between Bangladeshi policymakers and Indian policymakers. The Bangladeshi policymakers feel that the treaty has not benefited them as much, and so the idea behind my paper on the Tipaimuk was to perceive hydroelectric dams from a cooperative security perspective. So not from a national security perspective, but from a cooperative perspective. So in other words, this would translate to water being a resource that is shared and not divided. And a more recent paper looks at multilateral cooperation. So I have tried to perceive the multilateral dams being developed at the Ganges-Brahmaputra Meghna Basin between India, Bangladesh, and Nepal through an environmental peace-building framework, which means that environmental objectives are given precedence, and hydroelectricity is essentially one issue among a plethora of environmental issues that these three countries cooperate on. And the research of this paper is derived from field work in India, Bangladesh, and Nepal. Essentially, the latest paper I've published is looking at the issue of grassroots environmental peace building, particularly targeted at the youth in South Asia. So I've done two case studies on this in this paper. The first one looks at cooperation between the youth on the Sundarbans, and the second one looks at cooperation between the youth of Pakistan and India on the Thar Desert. This is an open access paper, so anybody can read it if they're interested. And so in terms of policy work, I am working with the United Nations Environmental Program on a report on examining the impact of future technologies in environmental peace building. And this is with practitioners and academics around the world. And I'm also looking at the prospects of environmental peace building in Central Asia through the Geneva Peacebuilding Platform. Very recently, there has been an environmental and water-related conflict between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan in April 2021 regarding the sharing of water infrastructure. So environmental peace building, as mentioned by Dhanashree, has relevance all over the world. And so yes, essentially that's the work that I'm doing at the moment.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I'll open the floor for questions now. And those who have questions, please raise your hands, or you can also insert, you can just put the questions in the comments box if that works better. And before I take questions, actually one thing I wanted Ambika to also maybe talk about is her experience in the MENA region, which she couldn't touch upon a lot during her presentation, but maybe since you talked about how there are lessons to be learned from other basins where you have adversarial relations and where the politics is much more complex as compared to what it is in South Asia, and yet you have that experience of working with especially the grassroots organizations like Mirza mentioned, and how that can foster some level of peace building at the local level. So Ambika, maybe you can start by just talking a bit about that, and then we will take questions. Please raise your hands to the students and the rest of the audience. Yeah, Ambika.
Yes, thank you. Firstly, thank you, Mirza and Dhanashree. While you share his presentation with the students, please share it with me also. I would love to see. At some point, I also wanted to interrupt him and be like, please change your slide, but I'd love to see it later. And Mirza, just to your comment, I absolutely agree with the Bangladeshis on the Ganges Treaty. I think it really needs to be quite a bit sort of brought into the 21st century in that sense. I mean, I only said success because of all the treaties that we have and agreements in South Asia, that one actually looks at a little bit on equitability and certain other principles that none of the others actually touch upon. And I feel like we need to grab onto these little nuggets in that sense, which then actually answers a little bit of Dhanashree's question. I mean, from my work in the Middle East, actually, I worked quite a lot on the Jordan River and then also on the Tigris-Euphrates River. And while the situation between Turkey, Syria, and Iraq right now is the political realities are what they are and have derailed a lot of the work that we did 10, 12, 15 years ago almost now. There was a lot of cooperation mechanisms that had begun between the scientific and community across this region, which was really important because till about 2009, 10 or so, there was very little conversation on availability, on standardization of measurements, on what kind of gauging, I mean, coming down to what kind of gauging stations can we have across this river. And while this is incredibly technical in some ways and seems like very small and obvious, they were really important because some of the biggest areas of conflict was when the river crosses the border and there was no stations over there to measure at the borders. It led to a different set of understanding of what the actual reality of availability, quantity, and quality of the river was. And the minute we started this discussion on, okay, let's look at what happens at the border in terms of quantity and quality, and let's ensure that that conversation is the same across the border on both sides. So the scientific community would say, yes, we are all using the same methodologies to measure, to analyze, and then to infer from, as opposed to people using different sets of methodologies. And that really helped sort of build that trust between this community and then take it up to the next level. We also then involved members of all levels of governance, members of parliament, as well as people from the ministries and then higher levels of office, which I think was really important because at the end of the day, some of these decisions come down to your parliamentarians for legislation and everything else. So they also need to understand what these realities are in that sense. And so I think that's a really important added component of governance. Of course, then a lot of this some of it then was implemented. A lot of it then unfortunately wasn't implemented because of what happened in Syria and then in Iraq, and now there is fractured relationships over there. But I think those lessons are important for us to consider in parts of South Asia. And I think actually what Mirza, the idea that you have in looking at this between India and Bangladesh, I feel like this is really a key component over here, because a lot of times I've heard, and you might have heard the same, is that the idea of what is data becomes very controversial, because on the Indian side, we have some form of data, and on the Bangladeshi side, they have a different set of data that they look at. And then how do you then have this conversation when you're looking at two different sets of data? So I think that becomes, I also then want to highlight what happened with the Senegal River Basin in West Africa, another area that I've traveled and worked with a little bit, is that those countries in West Africa were coming out of colonialism, newly formed independent nations. They had a lot of border issues as well, a lot of conflict, but water cooperation is one that they managed to separate and have increased over time, in that just recently, it was about 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month ago, they now have started a new conversation on an agreement to look at groundwater collectively between 4 countries in West Africa. This is brand new in that entire region. In fact, it's brand new for almost most of the world. We don't really look at groundwater in that sustained format at all. When we say water, we are almost always only thinking of surface water. So, and this is despite the fact there are still border tensions between some of these countries in West Africa, but they have set that aside. They've managed to de-link these issues and continue with that cooperation. So I think that's another great example that we must consider, especially since groundwater is, I mean, people in this region seem to forget that that's a reality.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. You know, that's one of the things I raise in my chapter as well, that Mirza mentioned, that there's no talk about groundwater in any of these treaties or agreements or any talks for that matter. And, you know, technically it doesn't make sense, politically it doesn't make sense, but that's what we are dealing with today. We'll take a couple of questions from the students. I have a few more questions actually for both of you, but I'll take questions from the students. Nadeem Ahmed, you had raised your hand. Please go ahead with your question.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for the insightful lecture. I just wanted to ask regarding Iran. So now there have been several reports suggesting that basins like along the Helmand River has dried up because of decades of mismanagement. And we saw that now it has spillover effects in Afghanistan as well. So I just wanted to know, amid the protests that has been happening because of water and power shortages in Iran, pre-election and even post-election for that matter, what are the policies that could be implemented? Because the domestic debates never feature about such issues, especially the Raisi government has given out very little information about what the actual policy would be like. And so how do you think it can be resolved, and how much of a regional cooperation is pragmatic given the fact that there's a lot of mistrust among major stakeholders in the region, be it the Taliban, be it the Tajik population, be it the border Hazaras population, or anyone for that matter. So how can we chart out a plan for such a situation? Thank you. I think either of them can actually answer it. Maybe Ambika or Dr. Mirza can answer that. Yeah.
Either of you, maybe both of you can answer it, considering both of you have knowledge of this region. So you want to go first, Mirza, and then maybe Ambika can take over. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you very much for that question, Mr. Nadeem. I guess in terms of looking at any kind of cooperation, international cooperation in Afghanistan, we kind of have to go back to the events of August 2021 and consider what can be done in terms of cooperating with the Taliban. So Afghanistan is an interesting case for environmental peace building because yeah, it is an interstate issue and it's also an intrastate issue. The mechanisms of the two types of environmental peace building are slightly different, and the caveats, what works and what doesn't work, is also different. Given that Afghanistan is perhaps not one of the countries where the civil society is extremely strong, it would be very difficult to kind of create collaboration at the grassroots level. And the collaboration between Iran and Afghanistan, of course, depends on the political relationship between the two countries. I would just like to exemplify one particular issue that has continued despite the change in regime in Afghanistan, which is the TAPI pipeline. So many commentators have said that the TAPI pipeline may not go through because of the Taliban being in power. It may not have international legitimacy, but the reality is that the Turkmen government has an excellent relationship with the Taliban, and they have maintained that relationship throughout the American intervention and the Hamid Karzai regime in Kabul. Cooperation between Iran and Afghanistan would ultimately depend on the political relationship between the Taliban and the regime in Iran. and how this would evolve when international partners and if international partners provide legitimacy to the Afghan government. So yes, that's my opinion on the subject.
Yes, Ambika.
Yeah, thank you. That was a good question and a hard question, actually. I'm doing some research on this very subject, in fact, and hopefully in the next week or so, I have an article coming out on looking at Afghanistan's water and its neighbors. What I want to mention here is, interestingly, and you might already know this, but Iran and Afghanistan have an agreement on the river. It dates back to 1973 or 75, if I'm not mistaken. And before that, in the 50s, there was even discussion on creating a Helmand River Commission basin, which was quite unique for, I would say, this entire region in that sense. Of course, that basin commission never came into effect and that conversation stalled, but a lot of the groundwork for that was done. Of course, it probably needs to be updated. But I would say, in agreement to what Mirza is saying, is that in this region, the prospect for any form of water-related cooperation is probably more likely between Afghanistan and Iran than Afghanistan and many of its other neighbors. However, we do need to remember that every single neighbor that Afghanistan has water coming from Afghanistan into their country. So they will have no choice but to have some form of discussion, cooperation. Now, what that might mean or look like, given the current governance system in Afghanistan, is difficult to say. I am no Afghan expert in that sense, so I cannot comment on what Pakistan will do, for example, or the Central Asian countries where the Amu Darya also originates in Afghanistan, some of the tributaries, or China, which has a role to play in many of these areas. But the rivers and the Helmand and the others as well, they're not water scarce in that sense. There has been a protracted drought that we've been seeing for the last 3 years now in this region, which has led to the scarcity, which has then led to the riots and some of the protests as well. But if we actually look at it from the entire river basin, it's not water scarce. None of these rivers in Afghanistan are scarce from that perspective. They are stressed, they are mismanaged for sure. And it's unclear again what kind of management we're likely to see, though the Taliban in some areas has used water very positively, of course, to influence its community and to gain favor. But whether they will then flip that on the other side is, I don't know. I cannot comment. But I think going forward, maybe between Iran and Afghanistan, at least on this one agreement, it will stand. It hopefully then will continue in either in its present form or in some better form going forward. And the prospects for rain, they are saying in the next 6 to 8 months are unlikely. So maybe if next year is a better precipitation year, then some of this tension, at least on this space, will maybe recede. But yeah, it's not a very helpful answer, I realize.
No,
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, the situation is quite fluid anyway, so we can't really say what will be the future of, I mean, just the domestic part itself, we don't know how things are going to be. So to think of water related initiatives and other agreements that Afghanistan may enter into with its neighboring countries, there's not really much clarity on those aspects as of now. There are actually 2 questions in the comments. I think I'll take both of them. Both of them are from Roja, another student in the department. Probably Mirza, you may be able to answer the first one at least, because you also wrote a paper on grassroots level organizations and their role in peace building initiatives. So the question is about the role of riverine populations that live along the rivers, and what is their role in peace building initiatives? Do they have any role? Are they included in the negotiations between, say, negotiations that happen between states? So maybe you can answer this first, and then I'll take the next question from Roja once again. Yeah.
Thank you for that question. Well, if we just look at the GBM, the basin, it actually comprises of some of the most economically deprived people in the world. And to be quite blunt, no, they are not included in any sort of international negotiations on river basins. And this is essentially done because of the particular style of governance in some of the South Asian countries. We have a very top-down approach to diplomacy. And diplomacy is essentially, for a very long time, has been the realm of the elites. Even when you have, track 2 civil society members engaging, they're also essentially elites. They're elites from the civil society, but they're not necessarily grassroots members whose interests are being affected by these negotiation processes, but they have no say in it. So yes, definitely there must be grassroots representatives in any kind of negotiation over international river basins. And this is because of, from my personal opinion, this can be justified along 2 lines. Firstly, if you have grassroots members, then any kind of agreement can be made legitimate over longer periods of time. So there would be wider acceptance of any kind of water sharing issues. There would be less, disgruntlement and unhappiness regarding the sharing of common resources. And as you know, resource nationalism is rife in South Asia. So if you give any politician any kind of bait about resource nationalism, they would use it to garner votes. So to reduce that kind of perception, that sovereignty-based perception that focuses on, oh, somebody else is taking over the national resources, you must have grassroots members within diplomatic initiatives, climate diplomacy, water diplomacy. And also the second reason for including grassroots members is that elites often co-opt this kind of diplomacy to meet their own political interests. So what that means is that long-term agreements, which affect millions of people, say who depend on the GBM, are not prioritized, but the relationship or the political interests of elites are given precedence in agreements on transboundary rivers. And this sort of agreement will not be sustainable. If there's a new government next election term, then they will be under pressure to, do away with the agreement, and this would leave us, back to square one. So there's some very compelling reasons to include grassroots leaders in negotiation processes.
Yeah, Ambika, do you have anything to add, or should I? Okay, all right. So I'll ask the next question. Maybe, that's something that Ambika can definitely speak about, considering she has worked in the MENA region as well. So what are the methodologies that can be uniformly applied? Of course, that's something not possible, considering you have different contexts, you have different conflict dynamics, the causes of the conflict, and all these things may be differing from region to region. So in that sense, when it comes to conflict resolution mechanisms with respect to particularly resource management, what are the common methodologies, and is there something like a framework that can be used across the board? Either of you again, like maybe Ambika can start though.
Mirza sort of pointed this out, sorry, he spoke a little bit about this in one of his slides, right? If environment becomes, or aspects of environment become the cause of conflict. On the flip side, they can also then become the basis of cooperation. And so that underlying, I mean, it's not a methodology in that sense, but I would say that that underlying thought process is fairly common across the world. The other thing that I've seen that's a bit common is an adherence to, in some form or the other, the 1997 UN Watercourses Convention and law that is there. Some of these principles, some of the more successful river basin agreements around the world have that predate 97 have updated their agreements. They've added amendments to reflect this convention. So in that sense, updating your agreement to somewhat globalized standards and principles, and as well as updating it to reflect your realities of what is today and the future, become a little bit common in that sense. I would also say, based on a study of more successful, and there is no perfect river basin agreement or commission at all in that sense, but some are definitely more successful than the others, and that top level trust of course is very important. But I go back to what I said earlier, and is data and information and an understanding of the river. And the Mekong did a very good job in that sense of bringing together the lower Mekong countries to look at collection of data and then understanding of the data of the river. If you look conversely at some of the failed agreements and the lack of cooperation, this lack of data and understanding has played a big role. So in that sense, I would say that's an important aspect. I feel like there should probably be an amazing framework that people have put together, but it's not possible to have one framework at all because realities are different. But some of these different areas definitely become your building blocks. And then, as Mirza has correctly said, the riverine communities and the people that any sort of development is meant to benefit, if it's not benefiting them, then you're doing something wrong already. And so you have to understand what their needs are and how they understand that the river basin or the water or the lake or that ecology that they are living on, because their knowledge is probably far more in that sense. Especially if there are a lot of indigenous communities, they will understand the nuances that then can go on to playing an important role in your governance going forward. But Mirza, do you know of any specific brilliant framework? Because I would.
Well, there is some work done by Tobias Ide and Mackenzie Johnson. And so what they've done is they've looked at some of the pathways to environmental peace building. So I think Tobias Ide has identified 6 pathways. And in a study, I think on International Studies Review, he's looked at in what context these pathways to environmental peace building are successful, particularly looking at water cooperation. So he's come up with a large number of caveats. I can't remember all of them from the top of my head, but some of the pathways are building understanding and trust, and building of effective institutions, and then building interdependence, and some other pathways. And
sorry, not to interrupt, but there is one on shared responsibility and right as well.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that sounds very relevant. So what he's done, he's looked at how these pathways work in different contexts. So some of them work in interstate context, some of them work in interstate context, some of them work really well if high-level politicians are interested. Some of them work for water, and some of them, work for other resources. So there is, an arbitrary framework But as Ambika mentioned, there is no hard and fast rule because natural resources and politics are extremely dynamic. So it's very, very difficult to when you're looking at the interspace of the two, it's very difficult to come up with a solid framework. But there is some research being done on particular pathways to environmental peace building.
Yeah, I think I've also read this article by Tobias Hyde. I can share this again with the students on the, and he has also written a wonderful article on the downsides of depoliticizing the whole environmental peace building initiatives as well, which is also a very interesting article to read. Okay, I'll call upon Srikutan to ask your question.
Hi, ma'am. This is something in relation with the question Aisha has posted. So she has posted 2 questions. So it goes like, thank you for the lecture. I have a question for Ambika, ma'am. So how do you think the migration of affected populations in South Asia will lead to conflict in the future within the respective countries as well as between them? So I think she is mentioning how domestically and internationally the migration of affected populations in South Asia will lead to conflict in the future. And secondly, she has posted it is with respect to a documentary. Yeah, we recently had a class, documentary screening class. It was a DW documentary, which was like showing the condition of Bangladeshis to migrate from, the Sundarbans Delta region to Dhaka and other places. So my question was also with regard to that. So if you will answer to this question, I shall take my question after that, ma'am. Already.
So maybe, I mean, yeah, it's either of you. Like, again, I guess the question is also about another issue which is underexplored in the case of South Asia, migration concerning climate change or environmental change in general. It doesn't have to be climate change. And again, an issue on which we don't really deal with it. There are no laws or there are no agreements, MOUs, nothing really to deal with it as of now. So how does that complicate, like, peace building efforts, considering, the same populations which are affected by river flooding, for instance, who have to move? As of now, most of the movement is, of course, within countries, but there are also examples of seasonal migration and, other cross-border movements which are not recorded, but yes, it is happening as well. So maybe Ambika, you want to start, and then we can, have Mirza's take as well, especially in the case of Bangladesh. Yes, Ambika.
Thank you, Aishwarya, and for that question. I'm gonna say with the caveat that I'm not at all an expert on migratory patterns or migration of population. So I feel like Mirza will have more to add on this aspect, but it's definitely an issue that we need to be cognizant of because of the further stress that this places on our water resources and other resources as well. And this is not, I mean, within countries, we've seen the kind of migration, at least until in a pre-pandemic time, from the rural to the urban areas, and the stress that places on our urban areas in terms of environment, forests, water resources, housing, jobs, electricity, whatever that might be. And that's the same kind of stress that we're going to see if along these rivers, our development has no value in that sense. That development, if it doesn't benefit the populations that it's meant to, and it's actually detrimental to them, then you're going to see a lot of movement of the people that are living along these rivers, especially in the mountainous regions, to then other areas. And then our other areas, are they going to be able to withhold that stress of added population? Which then brings me back to what I'm saying, and I feel like I say this a lot now, but without understanding our rivers and what is likely to happen in the future, we are not going to be able to plan for this in any better fashion at all, which then also means how do we bring about that balance in our development needs and safeguard the river and the people at that same time? I'm definitely never going to be that person who says, no, don't develop. We enjoy a certain amount of development in parts of this country. And I'm speaking specifically for India in that sense. What we cannot go around saying that our Himalayan population shouldn't enjoy a certain amount of development, but that development needs to be better thought out. I'm sure that the communities over there would agree in that sense that arbitrarily building bridges or roads or dams or power plants is not the way to go. It doesn't benefit them at the end of the day. So then it comes back to what Mirza was saying. We need to involve them in that conversation right from the start. So then 10 years later, we're not seeing this migration that's forced migration in many ways.
Yeah, Mirza.
Yes, so migration is unfortunately, one of the most controversial issues in South Asia, and it is also one of the most obvious impacts of climate change. So if you look at some of the maps created by Andy Gain, some parts of South Asia are simply going to be underwater. So this means there would be massive migrations upland. Unfortunately, we've seen a return to hard borders, security-centric perspectives on international borders, which is not unusual for any post-colonial country. But what we do need to recognize, from a regional perspective, is migration is going to become a reality, and we must undertake some form of sustainable perspectives on how to deal with cross-border migration. Even in countries that have really good relationships like India and Bangladesh, there are still conflicts occurring at the border. People being killed and being injured. So climate change instigating mass migration is likely to be a real cause of concern, and this must be perceived, from a pragmatic, holistic, and regional perspective. But unfortunately, this often does not meet short-term political interests. People get quite upset about migration. I guess, if we are truly to imagine some form of a cohesive response, regional response to climate change, we must take into account migration. And as Ambika mentioned, domestic migration caused by infrastructure development is once again something we need to be very aware of, particularly when it comes to the development of dams. And this has a transnational sort of impact as well. So, for example, some of the dams being developed in Nepal, which aim to transfer hydroelectricity to India and then to Bangladesh, if they are not done in a sustainable manner, if people are not relocated in a sustainable manner, then it puts the whole question of regional energy cooperation into doubt. We have to kind of perceive migration not only from the perspective of climate, but also all the things that we're doing to counter climate. We're building these hydroelectric dams to produce clean energy, but we can't really ignore the impact that this has on people. So yeah, that's my opinion on the subject matter.
Yes, Ambika, you want something to add? Yeah.
If I can add, in the very famous Mesopotamian marshes in southern Iraq that are fed by the Tigris and Euphrates River in Iraq. Now, back 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago now, actually 30 years ago, Saddam Hussein had drained the marshes for various reasons. Then they filled up again. They then started sort of drying up, and these marshes were one of the largest wetlands that we had seen, the world had seen in this whole region, in the Eurasian region. They are now one of the smallest wetlands that we've seen. the number of dams and other infrastructure development that was built along the river, along with then the use of control of these infrastructure by, on one side, the Iraqi government, on the other side by ISIS, led to and compounded by drought and then seepage of seawater coming into these marshlands in southern Iraq, have now rendered these marshes almost dead, to a point that many farmers that I had interacted with in 2010, 2011 time had said that they started seeing snakes coming out of this region. And so they weren't able to then have this relationship that their forefathers had with these famous marshes. So now there are efforts to sort of build these marshes back up again and increase the wetlands. But the point is that, like Mirza said, it's just an example to exactly what he said, right? It's climate change, it's changes in our precipitation pattern, it's drought that we are not able to predict anymore. And it's the development that we are creating to counter all of this that's not actually being helpful in many ways. So I just wanted to bring in this one example to hopefully help highlight what he was talking about.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Srikutan, you have another question
Yes. It was regarding like the rights of people who are in such a condition. It was mentioned in the documentary that these people often don't know that they're climate refugees, so they have their own rights. So what actions are being taken by government or like NGOs to educate these people on their rights, and what further can be done for them?
Okay. Yeah, so anybody wants to answer that question, like the rights of people who actually get displaced by environmental disruptions? And yeah, most often they don't know, and most often they are not recognized as environmental refugees, obviously, because there is no law that recognizes them in the first place. So I don't know, like Mirza, do you want to answer that question? In the case of Bangladesh, what is the government doing in particular with respect to these issues?
I guess the actual data on the number of climate migrants is not very well known at all, but it definitely is very, very relevant within Bangladesh. I'm not talking about migration from Bangladesh to other countries, but actually within Bangladesh. So there is a lot of soil erosion in the country, and what this means is people's homes actually just disappear overnight. And this has been one of the biggest push factors in getting people to move from rural areas to urban areas. Many people don't really have the option of living a rural lifestyle simply because of soil erosion, river erosion, and climate change. And this has not so far attained the level of importance it garners from both from national governments, regional governments, and international organizations, in recognizing or trying to identify the numbers of people who are actually, moving from rural areas to urban areas every year. There are some estimates, but there is no cohesive policy on how to deal with this. And as you can imagine, if substantial numbers of people move from the rural to urban areas, this creates a lot of pressure on urban infrastructure, on the use of water, energy, and so forth. And it also undermines the lifestyle of the people who are moving, having forced to say, some of the examples that I've found through, just reading newspapers and some reports are, farmers who've had to abandon agriculture and come and work in the city to, work as rickshaw pullers and laborers and whatnot. And what impact does that have on food security? On what impact does that have on, the dissociation of a whole generation of people to the lifestyles of their forefathers? So unfortunately, I can't say that there is some cohesive policy to look at this kind of migration at the national level.
Okay, thank you. So Teresa, do you want to ask your question now?
Yes. Hello, that was a wonderful lecture. I hope I'm audible. Yeah. So my question pertains gender mainstreaming and environmental peace building. So I wanted to know if I actually have two questions. So the first one is, within environmental peace building, has there been any concrete efforts to ensure gender mainstreaming? And should I ask the next question now, or?
You can ask both. Yeah, that's better.
All right. All right. So the second one is related to the first one. So in the second one, basically the narratives around environmental peace building has always been, dominated by the elites, right? So within gender mainstreaming, do you think we should adopt a grassroots level approach to ensure that this sort of elite domination doesn't happen, and that we can, is there a possibility for us to adopt more practical measures? Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, okay. Ambika, you want to start?
Hi, Teresa. How are you? Hope you are well.
Yes, I'm doing well, Ambika ma'am.
I expected this question from you, so I'm glad to start. I'm going to leave the second part of your question to Mirza, because I think he has a better understanding of that, especially from an academic perspective. In terms of reality of gender mainstreaming in peace building, I'm going to say it's again very minimal. There are plenty of organizations that incorporate it, of course, in their work, especially in the development sector. But if we take it out of the development sector and look at it from a policy making side of it, especially in this region, it's going to be very, very little. It's also, from what I've seen, it's not as much as one would like in many other parts of the world. Of course, I've seen it. There is the concept of gender in terms of peace building does exist when we talk about it as a converse of conflict, especially given that more often than not, women do bear the brunt of some of these issues. We've seen it in South Asia, we see it in many other developing countries as well. But if to say that it is a concrete step or a concrete part of a framework that a country can look at to then adopt, I'm going to say I don't think that this exists yet. But if Mirza has other information, then I'm happy to be wrong in that sense. We do, of course, bring gender a lot of times in this space, especially when we look at it from a water perspective. I'm happy to say that a lot of these principles that the UN has do have gender as part of it. It then comes down to implementation and adaptation by countries. Of course, it's been done in certain countries and in certain river basins, but not so much by everyone. Interestingly, countries like India, China, and a few others are not party to some of these conventions, so then technically they're not obligated to follow through on them. But many of the countries, especially in Europe, I've seen it in Israel, I've seen it in parts of Southeast Asia, in Latin America as well. I know we don't talk about what's happening in South America quite so often, but they do have quite a bit of a gender component in at least in their water management programs. So I don't speak about environmental peace building as a whole, but definitely from that water component side of it. But in terms of specific frameworks or the legalities, I think Mirza probably has more of an answer for you. Yeah, Teresa, thank you.
Yes, Mirza.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much for that question. There is actually quite a bit of work being done by the OSCE Environmental Activities Office on gender mainstreaming in water governance. So I was involved in one of these projects. The OSCE looks at water governance and the role of women, not just in terms of domestic water issues, but also in water diplomacy. So one of the regions that they're looking at is the mainstreaming of women decision makers. So they're trying to increase the level of female leaders who work in water-related organizations. There are several case studies. You can look up the report. I think it's called OSCE Gender Mainstreaming Water Governance Guidelines. It's on the OSCE website, and they look at how the involvement of women in enhancing water supplies in places like Georgia, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan plays a key role in effectiveness of the services, because women are the ones who are unfortunately it's mostly the women who are doing the domestic tasks. So they are aware of the the kind of services they need, when they require water, which particular time of the day, what quality of water do they need. So one of the ways this can be done is by training. Training women to collaborate with water organizations in ensuring that their rights and perceptions are being met. And the other way is dialogue. So having dialogues with particular stakeholders along with officials of water departments. And finally, of course, as I mentioned before, the building up of leadership of women in water institutions is very, very important. And the other thing I want to mention is the work of OSCE in examining the role of women in water diplomacy. So one of the findings in that guidelines is that when women are included in water negotiations between Central Asian countries, which is a very politically volatile topic, there seems to be less rhetoric, more compromising attitudes towards common resources. So surely there is some concrete policy action on gender mainstreaming in water issues. There's also the recognition of the need to have a broader goal for women in energy transition. So Irina recently did a study on gender mainstreaming in energy transition, and a very small number of women are actually leaders in the energy transition. Companies and industries and organizations, I think the number is I think less than 7. I can't exactly quite remember, but you can look up the IRENA report. So there is concrete policy action and recognition of the need to increase the role of women in the environment. But so far, I haven't come across any studies per se. But there's lots of reports, and please look them up. Thank you.
Thank you for these answers. I think, yeah, that answers really well about the gender mainstreaming part, which is, I think, something that everybody started thinking about quite late in policy making. You look at any policy for that matter. It's only in the last 1 decade, I think, there's a lot more focus on the gender issues and how to really make it a mainstream issue within policy making concerning climate, water, all these different concerns. But yeah, like Mirza mentioned, of course, at the grassroots level, it was not like that. There have always been efforts before that as well at the grassroots level, something that needs to kind of upscale now to the top level decision making as well. So I think maybe we can stop here because we are 15 minutes past the time. As I had mentioned in my email also, if there are questions, we may have to extend it maybe by 10 to 15 minutes. There are no more questions, but some of them have reached out to me by text that they would like to get in touch with you later on and ask certain questions about some of their so they are all working on term papers and research and all of that, so it would be interesting for them to interact with you more than just as part of this formal kind of event and rather, interact with you informally, I'm sure they would be much more open to ask some questions. So thank you so much, Mirza and Ambika, for accepting our invitation and giving such wonderful lectures and also answering all the questions in such a detailed manner. And on a topic, as I mentioned in the beginning itself, something that is underexplored, it's very difficult to think of how to really make it different and how to really explore it in a different way for the future, because this is such a dynamic area and yet it's not something that everyone talks about. So it's very important, especially in a field like international relations. This is still a peripheral concern, right? So it is very important to bring it to the center and think of ways in which peace and security can be achieved at different levels, and in which environment and water and energy, these are some of the sectors that definitely should be targeted by policy communities and other stakeholders and other communities who are affected by these issues. So as a very formal kind of vote of thanks, I would like to once again thank Ambika and Mirza for taking their time out and speaking with our students and the other members of the audience who have joined us this morning, at least in India, and I think for Mirza it's afternoon already. And I would also like to thank the head of the department, Dr. Nandkishore, who has been very active in trying to promote these activities, especially supported by the UNESCO Peace Chair. And also, like he mentioned, we are trying to create the space for research on environmental security and environmental issues within the international relations field, which is something that is just picking up momentum, at least in the South Asian region, if not in other parts of the world. So it's very important that we create that pool of researchers who may be able to come up with solutions that at least our generation or the previous generations couldn't. I would also like to thank the university, the Center for Climate Studies, and the UNESCO Peace Chair, as I mentioned, which is currently held by Professor M.D. Nalapat, and something that was set up back in 2009, and since then we've been very active in this respect. And I would also finally like to thank my colleagues who helped me coordinate the session, and also the students in particular. I think they are the life of the session, and I'm sure they benefited a lot from these lectures, and they also asked some very good questions, which would hopefully go a long way in terms of answering more questions. Actually, there are a few more questions I see. Now I find in comments there's one more question by Roja, but I'm sure Roja, you can just contact them later on and ask the question directly to them. So once again, thank you so much and have a nice day. Have a good weekend, in fact. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Dhanashree. Thank you, everyone. And Mirza.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Dhanashree. Thanks, Ambika. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Bye.